Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Sai Go Premanande, Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki, Shri Harinam Mantra Ki, Shri Harinam Prabhu Ki, Go Premanande. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Ipo, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramansa Parivrajika Charya Ashtottara Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramhansa Parivrajika Charya Ashtottara Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Guru Parampara Ki Jai. Sad Goswami Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopina Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Mathura Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Gangamai Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Sadhu Sanga Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga.
Hare Krishna. Better late than never. I think this is the first time I've been in this hall. Sorry I haven't been around because I got an AC-induced cold as soon as I arrived here, so I've been very sick, but we'll do what we can this morning. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashta Prayeshva Bhadresho Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishne Swadhamo Bhagate Dhanamajnanadibhisaha Kalaunashta Drishamesha Puranarko Dhunodita. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to try to say a few words in glorification of the Supreme Lord and the glorious process of bhakti, which we're all fortunate to be engaged in by the divine grace of Lord Krishna in the form of His divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder and Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, savior of the modern world. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So this morning I thought the topic in the recent classes has been mostly about sadhus and the qualities of sadhus, etc. So we can speak a little bit about that, even if it's indirect. From first canto, chapter 2, texts 15 and 16. Very famous verses, important verses, but they're always worth repeating. So kindly repeat after me. Yat anudhya asina yuktaha granthe, karma granthe nibandhanam chindanti kovidaha tasya kaha na kuryat katha ratim yaranudhyasina yukta karma granthine bandhanam chindanti kovidastasya ko na kuryat katharatim. yet which anodhya, remembrance, asina, sword, yuktaham, being equipped with, karma, reactionary work, granthi, knot, nibandhanam, interknit, chindanti, cut, kovidaha, intelligent, tasya, his, kaha, who, na, not, kuryat, shall do, katha, messages, ratim, attention. Translation: with sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of reactionary work, karma, by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message? Please repeat. With sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of reactionary work, karma, by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message? Purport: the contact of the spiritual spark with material elements creates a knot which must be cut if one wants to be liberated from the actions and reactions of fruitive work. Liberation means freedom from the cycle of reactionary work. This liberation automatically follows for one who constantly remembers the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead. This is because all of the activities of the Supreme Lord, his Leela, are transcendental to the modes of the material energy. They are all attractive spiritual activities, and therefore constant association with the spiritual activities of the Supreme Lord gradually spiritualizes the conditioned soul and ultimately severs the knot of material bondage. Liberation from material bondage is therefore a byproduct of devotional service. Attainment of spiritual knowledge is not sufficient to ensure liberation. Such knowledge must be overcoated with devotional service so that ultimately the devotional service alone predominates. Then liberation is made possible. Even the reactionary work of the fruitive worker can lead one to liberation when it is overcoated with devotional service. Karma overcoated with devotional service is called karma yoga. Similarly, empirical knowledge overcoated with devotional service is called jnana yoga. But pure bhakti yoga is independent of such karma and jnana, because it alone can not only endow one with liberation from conditional life, but also award one the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Therefore, any sensible man who is above the average man with a poor fund of knowledge must constantly remember the personality of Godhead by hearing about him, by glorifying him, by remembering him, and by worshiping him always, without cessation. That is the perfect way of devotional service. The Goswamis of Vrindavan, who were authorized by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to preach the bhakti cult, rigidly followed this rule and made immense literatures of transcendental science for our benefit. They have chalked out ways for all classes of men in terms of different castes and orders of life in pursuance of the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam and similar other authoritative scriptures. Om Ajnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्णकरुणासिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते। तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Excuse me. Madgavir Api Gopala Svikuriyat Kripaya Yadi Tadaivasampayah Pitva Hrishyayustat Priyajanaha. In the end of his 10th canto commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti prays in this way: My dear Lord Gopal, only if you accept my words as your cows can they provide enough sweet milk to give pleasure to your pure devotees. So we're trying to pray in the same way. We've already heard in the previous shloka, Tasmade kena manasa bhagavan satvatam patihi shrotavya kirtitavyascha dhyeya pujaschya nityada. And Srila Prabhupada has paraphrased this again in today's purport. The translation is, therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. And here it's told we're given some incentive why we should do this, because just by doing this, you become automatically liberated. This is the first thing that Sridhar Swami points out in his commentary here. He says, Bhakti rahito dharma kevalam shrama evete prapanchitam. That means so-called dharma without bhakti is simply the effort that you put into it and nothing more. Where did he say that? What chapter are we in? Chapter 2. Divinity and Divine Service. Anybody know? Kevalam Shrama should give you a hint. Yes, very, very well-known verse. Dharma swanashtata pungsam, ityadi. Shrama evihi kevalam. Just a useless waste of time. Idanim tu bhaktir mukti bhalatvam prapanchayate yadidi. In this verse, he establishes also that mukti is nothing but a concomitant byproduct of bhakti. To yasyanudhya anudhyanam, he says, here the word is used, anudhya, which means anudhyanam or meditation. He says, engaged in meditation upon that person who is the very sword or weapon by which discriminating persons can sever the false ego, which is the knot that binds us to karmic reactions. Who will not listen to these topics? Who will not relish these topics? This is the rhetorical question he's presenting here. And Jiva Goswami likewise discusses that glorification of hearing is given to develop a taste for hearing the Lord's topics. We don't really have a taste for hearing about the Lord. If we had a taste for hearing about the Lord, then we would never be able to stop hearing about the Lord. But most of us don't even begin to hear about the Lord. What to speak of stop hearing about the Lord? Or at least many of us. This is an audience of Mahatmas and Sadhus, so we can make exception for you. But for most people in general, they're not even interested in hearing anything about the Lord. What to speak of stopping? Because the taste isn't there. So there has to be a preliminary taste, and sometimes by great good fortune that taste somehow comes about through the blessings of sadhus. But this is the first step. With indifference to the performance of karma and other processes that are difficult, described in order to show the easy stages of bhakti up to the final stage of prema. The sword of remembrance of the Lord is what enables persons with discrimination, those who are COVID. Now we have COVID. COVID actually means kahavid. Kahavid veti. He knows something. You don't have to know everything, but if you know something, then you can exercise your discrimination. And discrimination is an important quality for those who would maintain the madhyama adhikara status in devotional service. Discrimination is lacking in those who are the kanishtas, and discrimination is unnecessary among those who are paramahamsas, uttama adhikaris. But for the rest of us, or for anyone in ISKCON, discrimination is very necessary because it is the substrate of our preaching. First of all, we have to use this discrimination, controlling our minds, and thus cut the knots of karma and ahankara, which bind us to various bodies. And then in addition to that, we also have to use the same discrimination to determine where and when to share Krishna consciousness with others and how to do so. So, Jiva Goswami repeats the same question: who would not develop attraction for the topics of this Lord, which deliver one from the greatest sufferings? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur likewise says that the qualification for bhakti is faith in the topics of the Lord. And this is illustrated in the following verses. Then he quotes a whole string of famous verses. Tavat karmani kurvita nanavirdete yavata matkatha shravanadau va shraddha yavan najayate. That's the first thing, that as long as one is not satiated by fruitive activity and has not awakened his taste for devotional service by hearing and chanting, etc., one has to act according to the regulative principles of the Vedic literatures. This is from 11th Canto, Chapter 20, text number 9. And in fact, I would even go so far as to say that even if you have awakened a taste for hearing and chanting about Krishna, if you are a member of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, then you still have to act according to the regulative principles of Vedic injunctions. That means karma. And karma, I'm using in its proper sense as dharma. Because if it's not dharma, then we don't call it karma anymore, do we? We call it vikarma. And of course, there's no such thing as vikarma yoga. So, this is the first thing that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur brings our attention to. And then he quotes again, that Shraddhalur Madkathashranvam Subhadra Lokapavanihi Gayam Anusmaran Karma Janma Chabhimayan Muhuhu Mad Arte Dharma Kamarthan Acharan Mad Apashrayaha Labhate Nishchalam Bhaktim Mayuddhava Sanatane. A person with natural faith should constantly hear topics about me, should sing and remember my topics which purify the world and enact my exploits and birth. He should perform dharma, kama, and artha as service to me. Having taken shelter of me, he will attain permanent bhakti to me, whose form is permanent. This is from 11th Canto, 11th chapter, texts 23 and 24. And then finally he says, Jata shraddho mat kathaso nirvinna sarva karmaso veda dukkhatmakan kaman parityage pyanishwaraha tato bhajeta mam pritaha shraddhalur drhanishchayaha jushamanascha tan kaman dukkhodarkamshcha gardhayana. Having developed his faith in topics about me and being disgusted with all karmas, he knows that all enjoyments are filled with misery, but he is unable to give them up. Still, with affection for me, with faith and determination, he will continue worshiping me at the same time. That's, again, 11th Canto, chapter 20, text 27 and 8. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur asks us, how does that faith arise? This verse answers. Remembrance of the Lord is a sword. Kartaga, Sridhar Swami says. Kartaga means another kind of sharp weapon, something you don't want to meet up with. So that sword is sufficient to cut the bondage of caused by the knot of false ego, which ties one up with karma. Then he gives an alternative explanation, or he says people tie up small amounts of money in knots in their clothing, especially if they're Bengali. Have you seen this? They throw it over their shoulder, the way they tie it, and there's a little ball there, right? That's where they keep their money. So, people tie up small amounts of money in knots in their clothing for the purpose of daily eating by dividing up their savings and spending a little each day. This knot of money for enjoyment is compared to the karmas allotted in this life for enjoyment. What do we call that? There's a technical term for that which is going to play out in this life, or which is playing out already. Prabhu karma. Prabhu karma. So we know from the Nectar of Devotion, it's explained there by Srila Rupa Goswami. Aprarabdha karma has these three stages, like a seed, like a sprout, like a fructified seed, and like a small creeper that's already sprouting out of the ground. And then your prarabdha karma means the thing has grown up and it's already produced its fruits and its flowers, or it's producing them. So this is the difference. So thus the sword of remembering the Lord cuts this knot of prarabdha karma. Who will not have attraction for topics concerning the Lord, whose remembrance cuts the knots of karma? Attraction for these topics arises suddenly in all people before even having faith. This verse indicates that a person who is more qualified and who has faith will therefore be even more attracted. Let's check and see what he says here. Yes. Iti tat kathayam pritirapi sahasajayate kim punaradhikara vyanjika shratteti bhavaha. That's what he says. This taste for hearing topics of the Lord, it arises suddenly, even in someone who doesn't necessarily have that faith yet. But it's understood that faith is a great asset. Just as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that it's understood that you will have a relatively easier time sustaining a mature commitment to pure devotional service if you are situated in acting piously. Otherwise, if you're trying to perform Vikarma Yoga, there's no guarantee that you'll be successful anytime soon, although in the long run you'll ultimately have success, because nobody fails in bhakti at any point. So this is text 15, but text 15 is almost inextricable from text 16, so I'm just going to move ahead and we'll cover that verse as well. Another famous verse. In case you don't know yet, the entire chapter 2 of the first canto, all famous verses. Just memorize the whole chapter. They're all widely quoted. They're all famous verses, all very foundational verses, very important verses. Everyone should know them. So this one you all have heard, I'm sure. Shrushro shoho shradathanasya vasudeva katharuchihi Syan mahat sevaya vipraha punyatirthanishevanat. O twice-born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The conditioned life of a living being is caused by his revolting against the Lord. There are men called Deva, or godly living beings, and there are men called Asuras, or demons, who are against the authority of the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 16th chapter, is a vivid description of the Asuras is given, in which it is said that the Asuras are put into lower and lower states of ignorance, life after life, and so sink to the lower animal forms and have no information of the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. As a matter of fact, we were hearing the other day, I think it was Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur who commented that, yes, on this namam dushkritano mudha prapadyante naradhama ityadi, that verse, he describes naradhama as a person who externally wears tilak and maybe kantimala, and who is very outwardly very civil in all of his dealings with others, but does not really internally respect the principle of surrender unto the Lord or his orders. And so he says this person is an anathema, and it's a little scary, but this is what he says. So these asuras are gradually rectified to God consciousness by the mercy of the Lord's liberated servitors in different countries, according to the supreme will. Such devotees of God are very confidential associates of the Lord, and when they come to save human society from the dangers of godlessness, they are known as powerful incarnations of the Lord, as sons of the Lord, as servants of the Lord, or as associates of the Lord. But none of them falsely claim to be God themselves. This is a blasphemy declared by the Asuras, and the demoniac followers of such Asuras also accept pretenders as God or his incarnation. In the revealed scriptures, there is definite information of the incarnation of God. No one should be accepted as God or an incarnation of God unless he is confirmed by the revealed scriptures. This is confirmed in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila chapter 20, whichever it is, I don't remember, that when, I believe it's when Gopinath Acharya was trying to demonstrate that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Lord, his argument was that he's the Supreme Lord because he's upheld by the Shastras. And there Prabhupada tells us that actually of these three, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, the real basis is Shastra. As Vyasadeva wrote in his Chatusutri, Shastra Yonitvat. What did Prabhupada translate this as? Books are the basis. It means exactly that. So this is something we always have to remember, that everything we do, everything we think, and everything that we claim to be bhakti, it has to be very solidly grounded and logically grounded as well in the Shastras. So this is the great mercy for which Srila Prabhupada stayed up all night writing these books for us, almost every day of his later life at least. And as he stated in today's purport, text number 15 purport, other great acharyas have already done the same thing that Srila Prabhupada did, writing all these books for us as well. It's expected that we should read them. If we don't read them, we're ungrateful. And we have no right to come in front of Srila Prabhupada and sing Guru Mukha Padma Bhakko Chite Te Kori Aikya Arana Kari Homani Asha, because we're hypocrites. So hearing from Srila Prabhupada is very important, and appreciating the great gift that we've been given for free is very, very important. So this is This knowledge saves us only. Nobody can pull the wool over the eyes of a person who's very deep in reading Srila Prabhupada's books. The servants of God, Srila Prabhupada continues, are to be respected as God by the devotees who actually want to go back to Godhead. Such servants of God are called Mahatmas or Tirthas, and they preach according to the particular time and place. The servants of God urge people to become devotees of the Lord. They never tolerate being called God. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was God himself, according to the indication of the revealed scriptures. But he played the part of a devotee. People who knew him to be God addressed him as God, but he used to block his ears with his hands and chant the holy name of Lord Vishnu. He strongly protested against being called God, although undoubtedly he was God himself. The Lord behaves so to warn us against unscrupulous men who take pleasure in being addressed as God. The servants of God come to propagate God consciousness, and intelligent people should cooperate with them in every respect. By serving the servant of God, one can please God more than by directly serving the Lord. The Lord is more pleased when he sees that his servants are properly respected, because such servants risk everything for the service of the Lord, and so are very dear to the Lord. This is the difference between the Lord and ourselves. If the Lord does something to advance his own mission, he's not risking anything, correct? Because he's not in any danger. We, however, are just small little jivas. We can be swallowed up by anything, anytime. And if we take that similar risk, how much the Lord appreciates. Therefore, it's stated, that the Lord cannot tolerate when such a person is blasphemed. Who knows the first verse of the Namaparathas in Padma Purana, Sanskrit? Just now, loudly, please. Ha satam ninda namna paramamaparatham vitanate yata kyatim yata katam usahate tad vigarhamapicha. How is he, it's a rhetorical question, how is he able to tolerate this? He'll not tolerate. Okay, so here Prabhupada continues. By serving the servants of the Lord, one gradually gets the quality of such servants. By serving the servants of the Lord, one gradually gets the quality of such servants. And thus one becomes qualified to hear the glories of God. The eagerness to hear about God is the first qualification of a devotee eligible for entering the kingdom of God. Nano satyameva karma nirmulani harikatharatis tathapi tasyam ruchir notpadyate kim kurmas tatraha shushoshorati. Sridhar Swami raises the question, it's true that love for topics about Hari uproots karma, but what are we to do if, even though we know this, or even though we've experienced to any extent, we still don't have a taste? What are we supposed to do about that? Very good question, isn't it? Punya tirtha nishevana nishpapasya mahat seva syat tatha chatad dharma shraddha tata shravane cha tato ruchi syad iti arthaha. Excuse me. He speaks this verse in order to answer that doubt. It means that by serving those who are completely freed from vice, punya tirtha nishevanat, there would be mahat seva. Serving the sinless, and by that, faith in the eternal religion, and then desire to hear, and then taste. There's a nexus here. There's a clear process here. The first thing is we have at least enough faith to listen to what a Mahatma says. Then, having heard from this Mahatma, if we get a chance to render service, then we get that dharma shraddha, we get faith in what he's saying, in that dharma, and then we get a desire to hear more, because we have more faith. The faith has been generated by the Mahat Seva. Tato ruchi syat, and then we have a real taste. We know that there are different stages of bhakti. Shraddha ratir bhakti anukramishyati. This is something that Jiva Goswami mentions next. So why don't we just continue and hear what he has to say. He says, Sridhar Swami has explained this verse. One method is serving holy places, and then he gives some examples of that from here in the first canto. As a matter of fact, Yad padasam shriyasuta munaya prashamanayaha sadya punantyupasprushtaha svardhunyaponashevaya. Great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Gangas can sanctify only after prolonged use. So the real thing is to serve the devotees. It's more effective than that. No one can deny that there are holy places with sacred rivers or that demigods appear in deity forms made of earth and stone, but these purify us only after a long time, whereas saintly pure persons purify us just by being seen. I always tell this one thing I saw, actually. Here in Texas, in Houston, maybe it was 1978 or 1979, my god brother Janardhan, he's still somewhere. He came out of Tamal Krishna Goswami's room, and he was just shaking his head with an astonished look on his face. So I asked him what happened. He said, being in a room with Tamal Krishna Goswami for half an hour is more effective than sitting for 3 months continuously and reading Srimad Bhagavatam 24/7. This is what we're talking about here. And then Bhakti Sandarbha also says, those who are unfortunate cannot develop taste for the Lord's topics. So, then he quotes from 10th canto, sages free from false pride live on this earth by frequenting the sacred pilgrimage sites. Because such devotees keep your lotus feet within their hearts, the water that washes their feet destroys all sins. Having to turn their minds toward you, the ever blissful soul of all existence, they no longer dedicate themselves to serving family life and home, which simply robs a man of his good qualities. Generally, he continues, taste develops by association with great devotees. Mahat Sangha. By serving holy tirthas, one can get service to great devotees. By serving great devotees, taste for the Lord's topics develops. If one goes to a holy place for other purposes, one may meet devotees who wander there or who live there, and one may perform service in some form by seeing, touching, and conversing. You have only to see such a person, maybe to brush against such a person in the bus, or talk to that person. But by that brief contact, one develops faith in worshiping the Lord. One then develops desire to hear what these devotees are discussing when they spontaneously speak about the Lord. From that hearing, taste for these topics develops. Thus it is said, and then he quotes 3:25:25. We're running out of time, so I'll not. Satam prasangatmanam virya samvido, famous verse, another one. By association with the best devotees, that's important, the topics of my glorious pastimes become directly realized, bringing the devotee to nishtha. Then the topics become an elixir for the heart and ears at the stage of ruchi. By taste for these topics, asakti, bhava, and then prema for the Lord, who is the destroyer of material life, quickly develop in sequence. So, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also says the same thing. They're all saying the same thing. Faith in hearing or taste for topics of the Lord arises from the faith that is produced by the good fortune of mercy of great devotees, and especially service to those great devotees. So, there are different stages that we go through. Initially, we have that faith which is produced by mere contact with any sort of contact with a pure devotee. Then, satam pasangatmama virya samvidaha. Why is it called virya samvida? Because that person has complete understanding of the personality of Godhead. Samyak Vedanam. Sridhar Swami, I think it is, glosses this term. He has complete knowledge of the Lord. And yes, Samyak Vidvednam. And in that association, the topics become potent, become a very happy elixir, just like the medicine. Nowadays, if you buy Ayurvedic medicine on the market, instead of from your doctor, it will always have sugar in it, candy, because it has to be sukhada. Otherwise, there's no business, right? So, tasam joshanat, sevanat. From that we get enthusiasm or engagement for service, rendering service. And then, avidyane vrittir vartma yasmin tasmin harau pratamam shraddha tato ratis tato bhaktirano kramena bhavishyati. Iti artha. That means that from that enthusiasm generated through association and hearing and being enlightened by great souls and inspired by their presence, then we render some service, and by that service we get on the path of apavarga. This applies to everyone who is not Tamil. Apavarga. We have papababhama. I think you all know what that means. So, in interest of saving time, I'm not going to elaborate. You can ask the person next to you after the class. So, pratamam shraddha tato ratis tato bhaktir anukramishiti kramena. First of all, you get some faith, then you get a little introductory taste. This is chaya ruchi, a facsimile of ruchi, not the real ruchi, because the real ruchi comes when? We know this from Rupa Goswami's grace. Shraddha adau shraddha tato sadhu sanga to bhajana kriya anartha vritti syat tata. Then we get nishtha, then ruchi, see? So you have to be a little bit fixed in bhakti first, but there is an initial, how they call this now for these movies? Trailer, they call it. Just to entice you to see the movie. They give you some preview of some sort, right? Then you anukramishiti, stage by stage, step by step, we progress along the path of bhakti. And Rupa Goswami gives these 9 stages. First faith, then association, then bhajana kriya, activities of devotion, then anarthas will start to be removed, and then we get fixed, and then we get some taste, and then we become attached to that taste, and then we get a preliminary bhava feeling, and then we finally get prema. Sanatan, I think it's Sanatan Goswami, maybe it's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur elsewhere in this first canto, he enumerates, actually, he expands that list, that he gives 14 stages that you have to go through. But in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami gives only 9. And here in the Bhagavatam itself, Kapila Dev is giving in the 3rd canto only 3. Shraddha, Rati, Bhakti. And different acharyas have interpreted those terms a little differently. But according to Sanatan Goswami, in his Hari Bhakti Vilas, Rati means bhava, and bhakti means prema lakshana. And this is how we have to go. So, being medicinal, there is some taste, Jiva Goswami says. That means there's sugar in the medicine. Even there, by hearing the character and activities of he who elevates the fallen and so on, patito dharanadi charita shravanena. When you hear about how the Lord elevates someone like Putana, even, then we get some faith that, yeah, well, maybe I'm not hopeless after all. And then we get some trust, and if we invest that trust in hearing further, then we get some rati, we become some attached, and some attachment is there, some affection, and that develops into bhakti. And then we're eventually elevated to the transcendental position. But the important thing here for today's verse, if you take any message home today, that's this final thing I will say, which is well, what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur only says, Sadhu Sangata eva bhagavati manoratim vahati iti yatra kramam aha satamiti. This verse in the third canto, Satam Prasangan, it describes how it is only by the association of a devotee, pure devotees, and that we get any kind of taste, and then gradually we go through these various stages that we've already mentioned. But it's important, another thing here is that what he says, Sangha prarthya iti. Purvoktehe prathamam shraddha tatha satam prakrishtat sangan mama katha bhavanti iti. So that means that it has to be prakrishta sangha. What does prakrishta mean? Those who speak Hindi understand. Prakrishta रूप में इसका मतलब क्या है? Prakrishta means very special. Not just rank and file devotee, but somebody who's really got deep faith. We know already from 11th canto and other places, it is faith only, the level of faith that we have that distinguishes between the Kanishta Adhikari, the Madhyama Adhikari, the Uttama Adhikari. So you find somebody whose faith is very deep, he's going to be higher in that paradigm. So if you hear from that person, then you can actually become purified. You can actually get a real taste for the topics. I mean, you'll be purified in either case, but the more potent association means more potent benefit. If we hear from the more potent speaker, then we get more potent benefit. And then we actually begin to develop that taste for the topics themselves. Otherwise, from ordinary association or hearing from ordinary speakers, there's bhajana kriya, but the stories don't become nectar necessarily. So this is an important point that he brings up here, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So, and this is consistent with what we've heard from Rupa Goswami and his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Srimad Bhagavatarthanam asvado rasikaihi saha. Rasikai means the great devotees, those who actually have this taste. This is what we're talking about. That is the distinction. Sajati ashaye snigdhe sadhu sanga swatovare. And if we can, if we are fortunate enough to find ourselves in the association of such rasikas, and 3 other conditions are met, then we will also get the full benefit of this sadhu sangha. They have to be swatovare. They have to be more advanced in their faith than we are. That's important. Because association doesn't just mean you get together with your friends who are also devotees and you have snacks and watch the cricket match. That doesn't elevate us so much. We're talking about associated with superior persons whose faith is better than us. And sajatiya, the person has to be endowed with a similar taste for Krishna consciousness as we are, as we have, or as we are interested in developing. That's another thing. Sajatiya hona chahiye. And then finally, snigdhe. That person has to be affectionate, because the mercy will be inclined to give mercy. So 3 things. The person has to be very deeper in his faith, has to have a similar taste as to what we aspire for, and the person has to be inclined to show mercy to us. Then we will get the full benefit of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and associating with devotees as discussed in these verses. I'm going to stop here because the time is less, but in case anybody has any questions, we can discuss. Yes, Shastra Krita. Otherwise, if you shout, maybe I'll hear it. I caught him off guard.
Thank you, amazing points and teachings. So recently one young man from India, he got a Gita from me. On a college campus, he got a Gita from me and he read it. And he started chanting. But then I was following up with him, and then he said, oh yeah, I'm following this, saint from Vrindavan. And he said to me, his teachings are just same as like what you teach me, like namely like Prabhupada's teachings. So I got like blood pressure, so I kind of visibly agitated. I told him this, nobody likes Srila Prabhupada and his disciples. And he was bewildered, like that I came across like sectarian. So how do we tell to people that it's not just any devotees, but Srila Prabhupada's and teachings and his disciples are very special, and there's no hope unless, they follow Srila Prabhupada without coming across like...
Yeah, good question. Yena kena prakarena mana Krishna deveshyet. Somehow or other you have to find whatever commonality you have and with your audience and encourage them in that. Joshiate sarva karmani, whatever it is that they're attached to. But make sure it's engaged in Srila Prabhupada's service, because that is Mahat Seva. And especially if you can engage that person in book distribution or kirtan or prasadam distribution. These are the three favorite techniques that Srila Prabhupada is always encouraging. We engage the person, and then if he's sincere, then Krishna will help him, and he'll see what it is. Ultimately, it's up to the individual. What we don't want to do is come across as being fanatical. It's sometimes, with some people especially, it's kind of hard not to look that way, because people are inclined to find faults also. But anudvega karam vakyam ityadi in chapter 17, Krishna says that we have to speak something which is true, which is very pleasing, which is beneficial, and it's kind of hard to do all those things at once, isn't it? So that's why it's a fine art, preaching. And what is the quality that it demands of us? Empathy. You have to understand. Atmaupam yena sarvatra samam pashyati arjuna ityadi. So, without knowing any further details, that's one thing I can suggest just off the top of my head. Anything else? Vaisheshika Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Mukunda Datta Prabhu. Thank you for walking the earth.
Hare Krishna.
I do have a question.
It's one of my favorite Vaisheshika phrases. I use it myself.
It's from the heart. You mentioned the spontaneous way in which faith may arise. Or not faith, you said interest in hearing. One may hear, one may have a spontaneous attraction for hearing even without faith, you mentioned. Also, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in describing the 5 most important out of the 64 items of devotional service, because they're extremely potent, says even without faith in them, one will make advancement if he has a little connection with them. And in this context, I was wondering if you could comment on the last verse in the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Ashodaya Hutam Datam, where Krishna says, without faith in a particular ritual or activity of any kind, then it's asat. It has no meaning, it has no effect. Where does agyatha sukriti come into play in that regard, and also does it relate to the points that you made? Thank you.
Now, because this sound system is kind of having an Indian echo, I'm not really able to hear maybe 85 or 90% of what you hear, of what you've spoken. But I think you're asking, where does faith come into this question when one just comes in contact with a devotee and is given spontaneous faith? Is that what
Specifically, I'm saying,
yeah.
Krishna says at the 17th chapter
Yeah,
of
I know
Bhagavad
the
Gita
verse.
that
Yes.
without faith, there's no effect.
Yes.
Whereas we
Okay.
talk about there's a way in which there is an effect, even we call it a gyata sukriti, even before somebody has faith. In fact, it's the precursor to faith. Before ado shraddha, then there's a gyata. He doesn't have any awareness, therefore he doesn't really have faith, nothing to have faith in. So how does it arise? If Krishna says there's no effect, then what is the effect? What's the difference?
Yeah. Well, with regard to the verse from chapter 17 of the Bhagavad Gita that says that sacrifice will have no effect if it's not performed with faith, that's in regard to a sacrifice, or I mean, I hate to say a ritual context, but what we're talking about today is not exactly the same thing, because we're talking about entry-level Krishna consciousness, and or rather how one enters into Krishna consciousness. It seems to be, what I'm understanding from these verses and others like it, is that just by even a casual association with a very powerful saintly person, one can be infused with faith that was not necessarily there already. I mean, to some degree, we can say everyone has some degree of faith, even if it's very, very slight. But it seems that there's something in the association of pure devotees that instills that faith in us. It is created by various things like this. So it's a mystical process. It's like Prabhupada explains elsewhere in this same chapter of the Bhagavatam, that how can we understand that one is situated in bhakti just by rendering service unto a pure devotee? It's a mystical thing. Here it's stated that the faith is instilled in us even before we render the service. But by rendering service, further faith is generated, that is sure. So it just seems to be a function of mercy, and it's something that Krishna has reserved. It's a special privilege, I would say, that Krishna appears to have reserved for his pure devotees. I wouldn't want to say much more than that without having a specific or explicit reference. But that's what I understand of this verse and its commentaries. Is that okay?
Better than okay.
Mahat sevam dwaram ahur vimuktehe. This is another thing that we didn't really get a chance to speak on, but it's clearly related to this, that when we talk about Mahat Seva, it means either great service or it means service to a great person. So in the case of, you take it Mahatma Seva, then it's the same thing as elsewhere we've heard, Punya Tirtha Nishevanat. And the Acharyas commenting on these verses, today's verses, they say that Punya Tirtha means a person who is nishpapa, a sinless person. And that can really only be a devotee, especially in Kali Yuga. So somehow or other they have this Shakti, special Shakti of the Lord, that they can instill faith in others just by briefly, what did he say, by touching, by hearing, or by conversing. That's what it was, I think. Seeing, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, so it's a great mercy, and it seems to be one that Krishna has, reserved for his devotees to distribute rather than himself. Anyone else want to make any comments on this? Or
Hare Krishna. So as you mentioned about remembrance of God, likely it eradicates all the karma reactionary. So I have a friend which I have given also Gita, and he drinks like the sloka Rasvam Apsu Konteya, means taste of water. Oh, whenever I drink wine, I remember Krishna. So, because that is Prabhupada mentioned in the purport. But my point of saying is remembrance of that Krishna is the beginning or is it the means? And that is also by remembering every day, 1 year, second year, is a beginning to remove your bad habits, or by remembering at the time of death, the same mentality will lead you to liberation.
Yeah, this is very similar to the first question we had about somebody who thinks that, what my guru from wherever he's from is teaching is the same thing as Srila Prabhupada. So similarly, he thinks that when Krishna says, I am the taste in water, then I can also meditate that Krishna is the taste in alcohol. But it's not so. However, how do we deal with such a thing? Again, I would encourage the consciousness of God inherent in that person's, or maybe I should say ostensible in that person's statement. But at the same time, I would find a way in which to inject the principle of actual surrender to Krishna. And you require a tremendous amount of empathy to do that, as I said, in some cases more than in others. But that's always what we want to try to do, because when a person invests his volition in trying to please the personality of Godhead in any way, that's what helps them to make advancement. So somehow or other, maybe you have to tolerate those statements of the person for some time, but those statements, he should not be making those statements even after 10 or 20 years of hearing from Mahatmas like yourself. So this is your duty, that you have to find a way and means in which to inject into the dull brains of the materialists, Prabhupada said, this principle of Krishna consciousness, so that he can, on his own, try to practice in more proper manner. Is that okay? There was one more question over here. I think somebody, yeah. And then Govinda Charan or Aditya Narayan will have to tell me that when to stop, because I'll go on forever.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you. I understood you said that you're making this general point that if we don't have a taste for Krishna Katha, we should serve devotees, and by that service we can get the taste. But if we don't have a taste for serving devotees, we can serve the holy tirthas.
Okay. Yeah, everybody heard that question?
I'm just saying, you made that point, right?
Yes.
I was correct.
Well, sort of, yeah. That was, I believe, Sanatana Goswami, somebody, one of the, Jiva Goswami perhaps.
So my question is, what does it mean to serve the holy tirthas, and how does that lead to taste for serving devotees?
Yeah. Let me first of all qualify your assumption, because what I understood from his purport is that we can associate or serve the holy places, but that will purify only after a long time. It's a very slow process. Whereas he also said that the nature of those holy places is that there are Mahatmas wandering in them. And we have an increased likelihood of coming in contact with those Mahatmas. And if we even see or touch or converse with such Mahatmas, then that's like the express lane towards developing our own faith. We're just immediately brought to the platform of faith, which is not going to happen otherwise. So there is a difference. They're both beneficial, but the benefit is not equal in each case. Is that answering your question? Okay? All right. Anything else? In the front here. Okay, last question.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, excellent class, lot of information. It was like beautiful. So Prabhuji, I have a question. So currently, like in the Sadhu Sanga, right? We have excellent association of Maharaj, pure devotees, and our momentum is very high in terms of bhakti. We are all enthusiastic. But when we go back, how can we keep that momentum, the same momentum? I know we can hear the lectures, but that is not same as having the in-person association of Maharaj.
Yeah.
So
Very
how do
good
we
question.
do that utsah to be always high? Thank you, Maharaj.
Excellent question. Very, very practical question. Well, the best thing is you don't give up the association. Of course, we're all going to disperse, so you don't want to stay in the Frisco Convention Center forever. But we somehow have to stay connected. Again, I'm going to quote Tamal Krishna Goswami, whose very practical judgment about these kinds of things was something that always made an impact on people who heard from him. And he said that if for whatever reason you're not fully satisfied by the association that you have or don't have, as the case may be, then there are 3 things you can do. He listed 3 things. This is his formula. The number 1 thing, learn how to better appreciate that association that you have already, because it's always possible to do so. And that appreciation is, I want to say, fomented by recognition that anyone who has any commitment to Krishna consciousness can teach us something. You can learn anything from just anybody at all. You can learn something from just anybody at all. You may not be able to learn everything from that person, but you can learn something. And every single devotee has a unique relationship with Krishna and has a unique story of how he came to Krishna consciousness or is coming to Krishna consciousness. And that can be a great inspiration for all of us. This is our daily experience. We all know this. How I came to Krishna consciousness. They used to have this Back to Godhead series. So that's one thing. Just better appreciate the association, because another thing is that sometimes there's a block in our own vision that we cannot actually see how exalted our association really is. There may be Mahatmas amongst us that we aren't able to recognize because we're not advanced enough yet. So that's the first thing. The second thing he said is, especially nowadays, we live in an age in which you can just push a button, pretty much, and go anywhere in the world and get the association that's available there, to some degree at least. So you can actively or proactively seek out whatever association you require. That's why people come to this Sadhu Sanga. At great expense, we come to Sadhu Sanga. So it's obviously a priority, enough that we're willing to pay money dearly and bring all of our kids and everything. It's a very important thing. We can do that. We can go to Mayapur, so many great devotees, as Prabhupada, that's the whole point of Punya Tirtha. So that's the second option. Third option is not for everyone maybe, or at least not very soon, but it was Srila Prabhupada's example. Srila Prabhupada was not 100% satisfied with his god brothers and their, whatever inspiration or lack of inspiration they had in fulfilling the orders of their spiritual master. And although he tried to remind them and inspire them in whatever ways he could that we have some unfulfilled instructions, let us all work cooperatively and fulfill them, they were just not responding what to do. In those cases, Tamal Krishna Goswami said, you just go out and create the association that you require. But again, that's not so easy for a person who's neophyte. And you'll find out if you try to do it. So we have to judge. This is an order of priority. The best thing is to learn how to better appreciate the association we have. The secondary option is to seek out whatever association we can, and it's easier now than it ever has been in the past. Third option is that you create the association that you require. Srila Prabhupada had to do that. We don't have to do that. Look, there's 3,000 people in this room, and they're all Mahatmas, all sadhus. So we could just contact with them. Darshana, Sparshana, Sampashana, these are the three things. Seeing, conversing, and touching. And then we have our association. So that's what we should do while we're here. We have a few hours left until 11 a.m. in which we can really try to do this. I hope that's a helpful answer. Okay? All right, so thank you all very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.